Chapter 1 Beast. Tamer and Patinder. Today was their 10th birthday. Today luck would decide their fate at this tender age. Their future hinged on this moment. Today, they would contract their beast. The ceremony master stood at the altar, his robust frame imposing in the temple's light. His beast, evolved to silver rank level 2, pulsed with a subtle argentine glow. The beast had matured after reaching the 5th rank, an achievement few could match and even fewer could surpass. He struck his staff against the floor, the sound echoing through the ancient halls. The ceremony of 10 years begins now. The beast will take the mana poisoning your young bodies and save you, he announced, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. Remember, your beast rank determines your place in our society. Iron for the slaves, bronze for the workers, silver for the privileged. He didn't mention the higher ranks. He didn't need to. The 7th rank, gold one. Throughout the entire city, only 5 families possessed gold rank beasts, and the only living human with a platinum creature was the king himself. The only one with a beast of the 10th rank. A red egg rested on the altar. The boy who had placed it there positioned himself in the center of the circle. The egg cracked. It began to glow and then... a crimson salamander. The ceremony master's announcement pierced through the temple as Ron Blackfire's red egg burst into flames. From the ashes emerged a scarlet creature, its scales gleaming like living embers. Whispers of amazement turned to cheers, as the tiny salamander opened its mouth and spat a perfect sphere of fire that danced above Ron's outstretched palm. An iron rank beast at its lowest, but with vast potential. Not only could it easily rise to bronze rank, but with proper cultivation, it could even reach silver. The kind of creature that opened doors, that with proper investment, could transform a mere student into someone destined for comfort and privilege. Ron's smile widened, already tasting his future among the elite. With his family's proper cultivation techniques, his salamander would undoubtedly reach silver rank, guaranteeing him a place among the upper middle class. Even now, freshly hatched, it granted him great strength and the power to conjure fireballs at will. Next, the ceremony master announced. Ren's heart stopped beating for an instant. It was his turn. The metallic taste of fear flooded Ren's mouth as he stared at his gray egg on the stone altar. Around him, dozens of eggs glowed in other children's hands with promises of better futures, deep blues, vibrant greens, intense reds. Most guaranteed at least a bronze-rank beast at maturity, and the most expensive ones promised creatures with evolution potential up to silver level 3. Only his was gray. The gray egg barely pulsed in Ren's trembling hands. A pathetic heartbeat so weak he had to hold his breath to feel it. Today, this miserable egg, the cheapest available, would chart his destiny, decide his place in the world. All his parents had been able to get him, after selling their last sellable possessions, was this gray egg. Not white, not black, not even brown, gray, the color of failure, laughter, and congratulations. For Jin still echoed in the temple, as Ren approached the altar. His gray egg looked even smaller now, following the magnificent display of the crimson salamander. Ren mentally reviewed the possibilities for the 1000th time, clinging to hope. There was a 5% chance of getting a marsh frog. It wouldn't be as impressive as a fire salamander, but with the right cultivation technique, a frog could reach the highest bronze rank, a mature level 2 marsh frog. But he knew it was asking too much. The probability was too low. He had resigned himself. Ren would get the common plant. Yet even the common plant with its 95% probability wouldn't be the end of the world. An iron rank beast that, well cultivated, could reach the lowest bronze rank, and by avoiding maturity with a secret technique, some people had even managed to take it to bronze level 2. It wouldn't be easy. He'd need to invest every coin earned to buy the secret cultivation technique, work twice as hard as others, but at least he could earn an honest living in the end. A decent life. The chance to repay his parents even a fraction of what they had sacrificed for him. But the egg had 3 options. People called it the failures egg not because it usually gave a mediocre and weak plant. They called it that because of those who had the misfortune of drawing the 3rd option. First option, the plant of the mediocre poor people, 94.99% probability. Second option, the frog of the lucky poor people, 5% probability. And then there was that tiny terrifying 0.1% possibility, a spore. The spore of the unlucky poor people. The weakest creature ever recorded, incapable of even maturing completely within the iron rank. In other eggs, the lowest possibility, that 0.01%. That 1 in 10,000 chance was a magnificent creature with silver or gold potential. In this one, it was hell. Practically a death sentence in a world where power was everything. Look at the failures egg. Klein Goldcrest's mocking voice cut through the air like a whip. I bet it can't even summon a decent frog. All the children laughed. Ren kept his gaze fixed on his egg. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing how worried he was. Silence. The ceremony master's voice resonated beneath the ancient stone arches. Remember, this is the most sacred moment of your lives, the instant you cease being mere children to become tamers. Ren closed his eyes, trying to ignore the pitying looks and barely contain laughter. His gray egg rested on the altar like fate's mockery, its weak pulse barely perceptible under his trembling fingers. The patenter's son, the boy with the gray egg. The morning's first sunbeam pierced through the temple's stained glass, and his egg began to glow. Or at least that's what Ren wished he could say. His egg barely emitted a dim glow, so weak that several children had to squint to confirm it was really glowing at all. "Please," he begged silently, "anything but the spore." The egg cracked. It didn't explode into flames like Ron's. It didn't open in petals of light like this morning's blue egg from which a water horse had emerged. It simply cracked. A dry, pathetic sound, like a twig snapping. And from the crack emerged a small cloud of gray spores. The laughter began before the creature finished materializing. A spore. The weakest beast ever recorded in the history of summonings. A being so insignificant, it didn't even qualify as a complete iron rank monster. "Silence," ordered the ceremony master, but there was poorly disguised amusement in his voice. "Ren Pretender, extend your hand and receive your companion into your body for the first time. It will cure the excess mana in your body." The cloud of spores floated lazily toward Ren's outstretched palm. It weighed nothing. Emitted no heat. There was no sign of the mystical bond that was supposed to form between beast and tamer. It just floated there. Gray. Useless. "The 0.01%, someone murmured in the crowd. "He really got the 0.1%. Ren kept his head high as he descended from the altar. His parents had sold everything for this moment. They had worked double shifts. He wouldn't give these brats the pleasure of seeing him cry. Chapter 2 Taming Failure. Ren kept his head high as he descended from the altar. His parents had sold everything for this moment. Had worked double shifts. He wouldn't give these brats the pleasure of seeing him cry. The contract bond established itself with a flash so weak it barely illuminated his wrist. His beast now granted him a 10% increase in physical strength. That was all. For a scrawny boy like him, it meant maybe carrying one more small bucket of water, or lasting a few extra minutes in the field. Other children received the ability to manipulate elements, massive increases in speed or endurance, or even healing abilities. Every creature, from the most common to the rarest, granted power to its summoner. It was a fundamental law of the contract. Ron growled as crimson scales erupted along his arms, his nails hardening into reddish claws. His canines lengthened into sharp fangs, and a golden gleam appeared in his pupils. The salamander hadn't just granted him control over fire, and a 40% increase to his strength. His entire body was adapting. His endurance, speed, and reflexes would increase by 20%, and with each evolution, these numbers would double. By the time the salamander reached silver rank 2, Ron would have triple the strength of a normal human, a 200% increase, 100% in all attributes plus increased resistance, and his fire powers. Even a simple plant, what Ren had hoped to get, would have provided a 20% increase to vitality as its primary effect, plus a 10% boost to all attributes that could reach 30% or 40% with proper cultivation. But the spore, pathetic, someone murmured in the crowd. It's the only known beast that grants no base power, just that miserable 10% physical strength boost. Ren remained in place, bound by protocol to witness the rest of the ceremony. Each new summoning was another reminder of his failure. A wind eagle that enhanced its master's reflexes. An earth bear that doubled physical resistance. A mystic fox that improved perception and senses. And then, the final summoner ascended to the altar. Luna Starweaver. Her blue hair cascaded over her shoulders like a waterfall as she placed her black egg on the pedestal. One of the most expensive. The entire temple held its breath. The crack that appeared in the egg was like lightning in the night. From within emerged a shadow wolf, its eyes gleaming with ancestral power. The aura that enveloped Luna was almost blinding, multiplied speed, sharpened senses, and the gift of manipulating various types of elemental magic. Increases of 500% or 1000% weren't impossible with that creature. A beast with gold potential? The ceremony master's voice trembled with excitement. Extraordinary. Less than 1% probability even in a high-quality black egg. Ren watched as the wolf bowed before Luna, sealing a contract that would elevate her above almost everyone in the city. Throughout the temple, the changes manifested. Almost all children received them happily. It was the moment they'd waited for their entire lives. The weakness they'd felt in recent years due to mana poisoning transformed into a sensation of ecstasy and power. The eagle boy developed silver markings on his skin, and his eyes grew sharper. The girl with the mystic fox saw her senses amplify while reddish marks appeared on her cheeks. Each transformation was unique, powerful, a symbol of their new status. Almost all, except Ren's, his spore would be the symbol that his status was now the lowest. At least, he thought with bitter irony, it can't get worse than this. He had no idea how wrong he was. Then, it was his turn to transform. The spore simply dissolved. It melted into his skin without the slightest spectacle, and for a moment nothing happened. Then, small luminescent mushrooms began to sprout from his scalp, like tiny glowing toadstools among his hair. The laughter was instantaneous. "Look, he's rotting. Hey, Patinder, are those mushrooms on your head or little penny? Silence. The ceremony master tried to intervene, but the mockery continued. Careful, it's contagious. Don't get too close, or you'll grow mushrooms too. The ceremony master cleared his throat after failing to silence the kids, trying to maintain the moment's dignity. The spore can mature with proper time. It could reach up to 50 centimeters and grant a 20% increase in physical strength. More laughter. Everyone knew that getting a spore to mature was almost impossible. The cost in resources and time would be astronomical, all for a result that any common beast achieved from day one. Some children even pretended to sneeze and made faces of fear when passing near him, as if he could infect them. Each successful transformation around him only made his situation more pathetic, while others received claws, mystical marks, and changes that screamed power. He had gotten unpleasant decorations for his hair. Luna was the last to transform. The contract with her shadow wolf covered her skin with delicate silver marks that seemed to dance with the light. Her eyes acquired a supernatural gleam, and her blue hair rippled as if submerged in water. The aura of power emanating from her was almost tangible. 100% speed plus 50% increase in all physical capabilities, plus the gift of elemental magic. The mushrooms on Ren's head flickered weakly, as if even they were ashamed. In 1 week, announced the ceremony master, you will begin your formal education. The carriages will come to collect you for school, as agreed in the contract, where you will remain until maturity, 8 years. Afterward, you will have a brief rest before beginning your military service. He paused. Keep your beasts fused. It is a show of respect toward the sacred bond you have formed today. The ceremony ended. Ren waited until he was outside the temple, away from the mocking glances, the whispers, the poorly disguised pity. Only then did he close his eyes and expel the spore from his body. The luminescent mushrooms disappeared from his hair, and the small gray mass returned to floating beside his shoulder. To hell with respect. To hell with traditions. 30 years of his parents' work, they sold their house, saved over 1 million crystals with a frugal life. All to ruin it with his bad luck. The path home had never felt so long. Each step was a reminder of what he had failed to become, of hopes that had vanished with that pathetic gray glow. The spore floated silently beside him, barely visible in the evening light. His new companion, his symbol of failure, his destiny. Chapter 3, Taming Sadness. The path home had never felt so long. The cobblestone streets of the city center gradually gave way to dirt roads. Elegant buildings transformed into increasingly humble houses until he reached the outskirts, where his small cabin stood, tilted and worn by time. Correction, it wasn't even theirs anymore. His poor parents now had to rent what had once been their property. He stopped at the door. The aroma escaping through the door's cracks made Ren's stomach growl traitorously. His parents were talented cooks. It was what had kept them afloat all these years, despite their low rank. With their mature iron rank plants, the lowest possible, they'd been incredibly lucky to work in the city's most modest kitchens. Sure, the owner was a great person for not discriminating against them, but their skill was undeniable. That was the real reason they were accepted there. The smell of sweet root stew, Ren's favorite, mingled with freshly baked bread. He stood there, hand on the doorknob, the spore floating pathetically beside him. Through the window, he could see his mother moving through the kitchen with the grace of years of experience, while his father decorated the table with the only 3 candles they had left. They had prepared a celebration feast with the little they had. When he finally pushed the door open, the lump in his throat was so big he could barely breathe. Ren. His mother turned slightly before his father. They both looked at the small gray spore, and Ren could see the exact moment hope abandoned their eyes. Still, his mother wiped her hands on her apron and opened her arms. My little Tamer. The tears Ren had held back for hours finally began to fall. I'm sorry, he whispered as he entered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, my child, his mother wrapped him in her arms. It's not your fault. It will never be your fault. You spent everything, sold everything, and I. His father approached, his steps heavy from a long day's exhaustion in the kitchens. He knelt before Ren, placing his large hands on the boy's small shoulders. Son, look at me. Ren looked up, his vision blurry with tears. Remember when I burned an entire batch of bread last year? Ren nodded, confused. And remember what we did? We cut it into cubes and turned it into croutons. Exactly, his father smiled. Sometimes life doesn't give you what you expect, but that doesn't mean you can't make something good with what you have. But the spore. It's part of you now, his mother added, and we love every part of you. Hey, his father joined the embrace, his voice hoarse. You're our son. It doesn't matter if you have a spore or a dragon. But it did matter. Of course it mattered. The dining room was small but filled with love, and the aroma of the outskirts' finest cooking. But try as he might, he couldn't enjoy it. His parents had prepared everything they could in their new situation: sweet root stew, freshly baked bread. They'd even managed to get some wild berries for dessert. The 3 candles illuminated the table with a warm glow so different from the spore's gray radiance. "Eat a little, darling." His mother served a generous plate. "You've had a long day. I'm not hungry." "Just one bite," his father insisted. "Your mother spent hours cooking," but not even the aroma of his favorite dish could overcome the bitter taste of disappointment. Ren rose from the table, tears returning to his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered before running to his room, the spore following him like a gray shadow of guilt. "Ren," his mother called, "at least take some bread." But the only response was the sound of a door closing. In the dining room, the 3 candles continued burning, illuminating a table full of food prepared with love and hope. His parents exchanged glances, the weight of worry visible on their tired faces. The afternoon's attempts bore no fruit either. "I'm not hungry," he shouted when his mother knocked on the door with a tray of food. In the darkness of his room, the boy observed the weak flickers of his pathetic companion. 1 week. In 1 week he would have to face school, the mockery, the contempt. 1 week to accept that his life would be exactly what everyone expected from someone with the worst possible beast. A gray life. In the small dining room, the candles illuminated the exhausted faces of 2 people who had just watched their last hopes turn into gray spores. And the school contract lay on the table. It was mandatory. Once signed, he had to attend the School of Cultivation and Evolution for 8 years. There he would learn to strengthen his creature, develop its abilities, become a true tamer. In one of the best schools, if not the best. Well, that was the idea, but... 60 years, the father murmured, both of them already 60 years old. Their mature iron-rank plants barely glowed at their wrists, and gave them hair composed of leaves and vines, the result of a life of limited cultivation. Their hands, weathered by decades working in kitchens, trembled. "We sold everything for this. Everything." His fingers moved over the document they had signed this morning. The one that had cost them over 1 million crystals. The one they'd worked their entire lives for. In their youth, they hadn't had the resources to buy the secret techniques needed to evolve their beasts beyond the basic state. A simple 40% increase in vitality, and 20% to all attributes was all they got from them. But being mature plants allowed them to pretend they were Bronze 1, barely enough statuses to keep their jobs in the third-rate kitchens on the city's outer line. Luckily, the vitality bonus made them look and feel younger, like a couple in their 40s. Today, however, nothing in their life felt like luck. "We sold everything for this," whispered the mother, tears falling on her worn apron. "Everything so he could have a real chance at a good school. So his plant could grow to bronze, evolve, give him a better life than ours." The school was expensive for a reason. 8 years of intensive training, access to cultivation techniques, resources for evolution, connections, everything necessary to transform a common beast into something more. They had dreamed of something better for Ren, a rank that would let him walk the main streets without lowering his head. With a normal plant, Ren would have had the chance to reach bronze rank 2, improve his vitality to 80% upon maturation, and all his base increases to 40%, maybe even get a job in the city's good kitchens learning from his parents. But with a spore, he can't back out now. The mother clutched the contract in her trembling hands, silent tears running down her cheeks. The payment is made, and the laws are clear. Every contract must be fulfilled, and every child with a beast must complete their basic education since they passed that law last year. If only I hadn't gotten sick, we could have had enough. I was so close to buying the brown egg, but that cursed expensive medicine, I should have died. Don't say that. It's not your fault. Ren wouldn't have wanted that, the mother admonished. Besides, maybe choosing the best and most expensive school was too greedy on our part. What have we done? Chapter 4, Taming Hope. They had dreamed of something better for Ren. But with a spore. 8 years. The father sank into his chair. 8 years watching others evolve their beasts while our foolish investment takes away his hope for. He didn't need to finish the sentence. A spore couldn't evolve its rank. There were no cultivation techniques to study, no improvement paths to explore, no secret techniques to buy. Many had already tried. Richer people with much more support. The only one who succeeded was labeled as the worst failure. A fortune spent for an almost useless gain, 20% strength. Since that day, the spore has been the symbol of failure. Ren would spend 8 years learning things he could never apply, his surroundings a constant reminder of what he couldn't achieve. 8 years of mockery, being the school's laughingstock. 8 wasted years, because what could he learn about cultivation and evolution with a creature that couldn't even evolve? Sadness led the father to reminisce about the past, a past that Ren had illuminated. "Remember that day?" he asked suddenly, his gaze lost in the candle flames. "When I couldn't find the medicine demanded by the kingdom because it was depleted due to severe mana contamination from that year's hoard. And I had to go out searching for a mana poisoning cure and also found that plant you ate. We thought we had been blessed." She nodded, taking his hand. How could she forget? They had been trying to have a child since their 20s. Almost 3 decades of broken hopes, watching their friends form families while they remained alone. They had lived a frugal life, pooling their resources to form a happy family, interested only in one thing they couldn't obtain no matter how much they accumulated. Almost 1 million. An incredible amount for citizens of their rank. They'd thought about using the money to cure their infertility, but they were already so old. They had given up. But that trip to the outskirts, the plant I found in the outskirts, mistaking it for that high-quality 100-year-old sweet root. He continued, when you ate it, I thought I had killed you. You were so pale, so cold. And a week later, I felt like I was 20 again. She smiled sadly. And the following year, we succeeded without trying. Our miracle. They fell silent, listening to the muffled sobs coming from Ren's room. Their little miracle, the child who had given them so much life and happiness when they had almost lost hope, now faced a cruel destiny. It's as if the dragon gods were mocking us, she murmured. They gave us a child when we were already too old, only to watch him suffer, he completed, squeezing her hand. The candles, almost spent, continued burning, their flames reflecting on the school contract on the table. In the adjacent room, their 10-year-old son cried silently, a small gray spore floating beside his pillow like a constant reminder of his fate. The feast they had prepared with so much love slowly cooled on the table, untouched, while 2 elderly parents wept for the cruel turn their life's miracle had taken. Ren lay on his bed, tears drying on his cheeks while rage gradually replaced sadness. The spore floated nearby, its weak gray glow only serving to enrage him more. Go to school like this? It was a cruel joke. He could already see the next 8 years unfolding before him like an endless nightmare. While other children would learn to evolve their beasts, to awaken new powers, he would sit there, with a creature that couldn't even mature properly. Maybe it would be better to do what other unfortunate rotting ones did. He couldn't. He loved his parents and they loved him too much too. He needed to find something to distract himself. He turned to the small bookshelf beside his bed, where he kept his favorite book, worn from countless readings, the second contract of the Wandering King. His fingers traced the worn cover, following the image of a legendary warrior who had achieved the impossible. According to the story, the hero had found a mystical medicine deep in the forest, something that had allowed him to form a second contract with a beast. It was just a tale, of course. In all recorded history, only the current king and a dozen legendary warriors had managed to obtain a second creature contracted. And none of them would reveal the way to achieve it to the masses. But Ren was still a child, still naive. Ren looked through his window toward the dark forest stretching beyond the outskirts. The medicine from the story? What if? But the thought died as quickly as it arose. His father, with his mature iron-rank plant, had returned half-dead the only time he ventured there. And he had real advantages, a great 40% extra vitality. An adult strength and speed increased by 20%, along with all his other attributes. A modest control over plants that allowed him to detect dangers and defend against some monsters, plus years of experience. And what did Ren have? A useless spore and a miserable 10% increase to his childish strength. He couldn't even lift the heavier flour sacks in the kitchen. How did he expect to survive in a forest full of monsters? The spore flickered weakly, as if sensing his desperation. Why you? He whispered bitterly toward the creature. With such low chances, why did it have to be you? Silence was his only answer. In the dining room, he could hear his parents talking in low voices, their voices laden with worry. He couldn't bear it anymore. He couldn't be the cause of their pain, the pathetic end to all their hopes and sacrifices. But he couldn't change anything either. Once the contract was formed, it was for life. The spore would be his companion until the day he died, a constant reminder of his failure. Unless, his eyes fixed again on the dark forest beyond his window. Even considering it was suicidal, the mana poisoning would kill him in less than 3 days with such a weak creature in his body. But as he thought about the school contract, about the years of torment awaiting him, what was worse? Dying while trying to change his destiny, or living 8 years as the school's laughingstock? His parents? Maybe he could make them happy too. Ren opened his worn book once more, his fingers tracing the illustrations of the dragons. It was believed that all creatures could become dragons by finding the right path of cultivation. According to the book, the Wandering King found much information alongside his medicine. It wasn't just any medicine he wanted. It was in the heart of dragon territory, where mana flowed so densely it could be seen in the air. Chapter 5, Taming the Decision. Ren opened his worn book once more, his fingers tracing the illustrations of the dragons. According to the book, the Wandering King had found lots of information alongside his medicine. It wasn't just any medicine that Ren wanted. It was in the heart of dragon territory, where mana flowed so densely it could be seen in the air. The Wandering King had traveled for months, crossing the lands of each dragon lord. The red dragon, whose scales burned like the desert sun, ruled over all fire beasts and reptiles. Under his domain, even tiny lizards could breathe flames. The blue dragon reigned in the ocean depths with his majestic fins and gleaming horns, where every marine creature swore loyalty. The green dragon, covered by a thick layer of vegetation, was lord of the deep forests, where every beast and plant danced to his will. In the eternal skies, the white dragon commanded all flying creatures, while the black dragon governed the beasts of night and shadow. The book showed a particularly detailed illustration of the articulated dragon, whose domains were filled with giant insects and creatures with exoskeletons. Each evolutionary line was represented by a dragon. Scholars the correlation between dragons and egg colors, due to variations diverging from logical branches in egg comes. But that wasn't relevant knowledge for the child. Ren paused at a page that had always intrigued him: the dragon of decay, lord of fungi, spores, and all creatures that fed on decomposition, reigning above, feeding and creating all creatures of his evolutionary line. At least dragons respect their subjects, he murmured bitterly, looking at his pathetic spore. Unlike humans. But the dragons and their territories were far from the human city, and for good reason. Humans had chosen to settle in this area precisely because the mana was so scarce that great beasts found it repulsive. They had no interest in it. For humans, this was their only protection. Only the weakest creatures, expelled and rejected by the stronger ones, prowled near the city. In the plains. But it was very rare they had to be injured, dying, to dare leave the forest. Without mana, hunger would catch them and they would die soon. The mana here, in human territory, wasn't nearly sufficient, and yet they were deadly dangerous, maddened by the hunger that mana scarcity provoked in them. Like wild animals seeking their next meal, they attacked anything that moved. Ren shuddered, remembering the stories his father told about the forest outskirts. How the beasts there had an empty, desperate look. How they ignored their own wounds, driven only by hunger and lack of mana. Even herbivorous creatures turned aggressive, attacking any source of mana they could find. But that was just the outskirts. In dragon territories, mana would be Ren's worst enemy. With a beast of this level, he could barely enter the first iron circle, with the lowest ranked beasts. Fortunately, the ruin his father found was right at the beginning of the bronze ring, and he could enter through the middle of the iron ring. Something like that could be possible even for him, right? Sure, he wanted to go to dragon territory and find a miracle like obtaining 2 beasts. However, he would have to settle for medicine that could expel his spore from his body or something similar. Something like that could be close to the medicine that cured his mother. Dragon territory, or even the silver ring, were out of consideration. If he ventured too deep, the mana would consume you quickly, and... Ren slammed the book shut, his heart pounding. Would he really go to that forest? Even thinking about it was madness. With his useless spore, mana might not be a problem, as he probably wouldn't survive even his first encounter with a beast. But while listening to his parents' muffled sobs through the wall, what other choice did he have? As night fell, determination had awakened more than courage in Ren. His stomach growled. The aroma of sweet root stew still floated in the air, more tempting than ever as his hunger had returned now that he had a clear purpose. He slipped out of his room like a shadow, the spore floating silently behind him. The floorboards creaked treacherously under his feet, but years of sneaking out to steal midnight snacks had taught him where to step. In the kitchen, the feast his parents had prepared remained untouched. Ren wrapped large portions of bread with stew in clean cloths, also packing several wild berries. His father always said berries helped keep the mind clear when fatigue struck. From the tool cabinet, he took his father's smallest kitchen knife, the one used for delicate work, and a worn canteen. Rope and his father's most precious map. He hesitated a moment before also taking the flint for starting fires. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. A noise in the hallway made his heart stop. Footsteps. He snuck back to his room and got into his bed just as the door opened. "Ren?" His mother's soft voice. "Darling." Ren dove under the covers, grateful for the darkness hiding the packed bag under his bed. The spore settled on his pillow, its weak gray glow perfectly matching the moment. "I'm so sorry, my love," whispered his mother, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her hand, rough from years of work but always gentle, stroked his hair. "If we could have gotten you a better egg." "It's not your fault, Mom, or Dad's," replied Ren, and for the first time in hours he wasn't faking the emotion in his voice. It was just bad luck. "Would you like some stew? It's still warm." "Tomorrow," promised Ren, hating the lie but knowing it was necessary for his mission. "Thank you for cooking it." She leaned down, kissed his forehead, and the familiar aroma of spices and love almost broke his resolve. Almost. "I love you, little one. I love you too, Mom." The door closed softly. Ren waited, counting his heartbeats, until the footsteps retreated and the house fell silent. With movements practiced during his afternoon escapes with friends, he tied the rope. His bedroom window overlooked the back garden, a drop of barely 2 meters. The spore watched silently as he secured the rope to his bedpost. "If you're going to follow me on this journey," he whispered to his companion while shouldering his backpack, "you'd better at least not get in my way." The night was clear, illuminated by nearly a dozen moons. From his window he could see the dark forest beyond the city limits. Somewhere out there lay his only hope for a different future. He took the rope in his trembling hands. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad." And he began his descent. Chapter 6: Taming the First Journey. Ren landed softly in the back garden, where his parents' mature iron-rank plants maintained an urban food garden. Though it wasn't theirs anymore, they could still use it to pay part of the house rent and cover some basic food for the family. Beyond the garden's wooden fence, just a few meters away, the terrain began to descend. The view of enormous plains lay almost completely hidden by darkness. There were no walls to climb, no guards to evade. Their house was one of the last structures before the civilized world dissolved into no man's land. Only some plantations dared exceed the common cultivation zone, those with enough for guards. But with this house so close to the external zone of the abyss, nobody wanted to invest in lands that could be invaded by hordes of cursed monsters if the army ever faltered. Being in the front line was frightening. But Ren didn't understand why they were so cowardly. In his 10 years of life, and according to his parents in another 30, the hordes had never overcome the army. These empty plains were perfect for cultivation in his opinion. Not that it affected him anymore. He pulled out his father's worn map, tracing with his fingers the lines and annotations he knew by heart. How many times had he heard the story his father, desperate to find medicine for mana poisoning, unable to get it in the market due to that year's shortage. He had been forced to venture into monster domain like many others. Many didn't return that year, and his father almost suffered the same sad fate, the mandatory mission that had nearly cost him his life. And just when I thought it was my end, his father always said at this part, I found it. A hidden entrance, as if the earth itself had cracked open to save me. I thought I had fallen into a night excavator's hole, but it was an ancient tunnel, probably from the era before mana's expansion. The map showed the path with obsessive detail, every mark, every turn, every landmark carefully noted. His father never knew why he'd been so meticulous in documenting a route he swore never to take again. But Ren suspected part of him always knew it would be needed someday. An hour later, Ren finally stood at the forest's edge. He'd been lucky not to encounter any exiled and hungry creatures. It seemed the day's bad luck had finally run out. Ren glanced at his spore. The spore floated beside him while its faint glow contrasted with the dark forest. Here, at the boundary, it was strangely peaceful. Healthy monsters never ventured so close to the mana void zone. Only the hordes did that. And on specific dates, following underground routes that humans had learned to predict and attack to contain and keep them from leaving the abyss. Here there weren't those kinds of problems. In theory, whispered Ren, more to give himself courage than to inform his silent companion. We should be safe until we reach the deep iron forest. Monsters, even iron rank ones, hate this zone almost as much as dragons do. Ren repeated to convince himself. He unfolded the map one last time, memorizing the first stage. If his father had found that underground tunnel, if it really existed, it would be his best chance. The monsters wouldn't detect him there, and he could advance much deeper into dangerous territory before having to face the real dangers. He turned to look back toward his faraway house one last time. They were probably still awake, worried about him, planning how to make his life more bearable in the coming years. I'm sorry, he murmured, but I can't accept that future, not without trying to change it at least once. And with that, he took his first step toward the forest. The spore floated behind him, its weak gray glow barely visible under the light of the 12 moons. The journey that could change his life had just begun. 3 kilometers had never seemed so long. Ren kept to the exact boundary where the earth was still poor enough in mana to keep most beasts away, but not the moon toads. The glowing trees betrayed the change in mana density. His father had specifically warned him about these creatures. No larger than a rabbit, these blue-skinned, translucent amphibians were almost invisible under moonlight except for their eyes. 3 bioluminescent eyes that glowed with a hypnotic radiance, capable of paralyzing their prey with just a direct look. They weren't particularly strong, barely immature iron-rank beasts, but their hunting method was terrifying. They moved in small groups, surrounding their paralyzed prey before beginning to secrete an acid that... Ren shook his head. He didn't want to remember that part of his father's stories. Or worse still, the night excavators. Slow but enormous beasts, the size of a cow, that dug complex burrows under the mana-poor earth. Mature iron-rank beasts. Their long arms ending in massive claws could split a man in half, and though they were lazy and generally solitary, their territories were full of natural traps, hidden holes that led directly to their jaws. Both creatures depended on traps to complement the poor mana in their environment. The spore floated calmly beside him, while Ren tested each step carefully. The ground here was treacherous. A network of excavator tunnels could collapse under his weight at any moment. The huge dead tree had to be close. His father had drawn it in detail on the map, an ancient oak, twisted like a claw emerging from the earth, marking the entrance to the secret tunnel. If he could reach it. A bluish flash caught his attention from the corner of his eye. Had that been? No. He mustn't look directly. If they were moon toads, a direct look would be his end. Another blue flash, closer this time. Ren kept his eyes fixed on the ground, his heart hammering against his chest. Moon toads always hunted in groups of 3 to 5. If he'd seen one, a soft melodious croak came from his left, then another from the right. They were surrounding him. Don't look at their eyes, don't look at their eyes, he murmured to himself, repeating the words his father had etched into his memory. Moon toads were slow, clumsy even. If he could keep his composure and keep moving, the ground creaked beneath his foot. Ren froze. That hadn't been the sound of an amphibian. That had been the unmistakable groan of earth giving way over a night excavator's tunnel. He was trapped between 2 deadly threats. If he retreated, the toads would catch him. If he advanced, he would fall into an excavator's den. And he couldn't stay still, the toads were already. A blue flash appeared right in front of him. So close he could see the details of its translucent skin, the pulse of internal organs glowing with bioluminescence. Ren closed his eyes instinctively, but it was too late. For a fraction of a second, he had seen the toad's 3 hypnotic eyes. His muscles began to go numb. The melodious croaking intensified, now coming from all directions. He could hear the soft padding of their feet approaching, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. Chapter 7, Taming Danger. Ren closed his eyes instinctively, but it was too late. For a fraction of a second, he had seen the toad's 3 hypnotic eyes. His muscles began to go numb. The melodious croaking intensified, now coming from all directions. He could hear the soft padding of their feet approaching, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. The paralysis was spreading through his limbs when the spore, without warning, fused with his body. Ren wanted to scream in frustration. Now's not the time to be stubborn. A miserable strength increase won't help me here. The weak glow of the mushrooms in his hair would only serve to attract more predators, making him a more visible target in the night. The moon toads were getting closer. He could hear the rhythmic padding of their feet, the wet sound of their skin secreting acid. The acrid smell already reached his nose, like rotting fruit and hot metal. But something was strange. The toad in front of him, the one that had paralyzed him, tilted its head. Its 3 eyes blinked in an erratic sequence, breaking the hypnotic pattern. The melodious croaking turned to discordant, confused notes. The mushrooms in Ren's hair pulsed with bioluminescence similar to the toad's, creating patterns that mimicked the glow of their internal organs. It was as if his head had become a distorted version of his predators. The leader toad jumped forward, its 3 eyes now fixed on the glowing mushrooms. The confusion broke its concentration, and with it, the paralyzing spell. Ren felt control of his body return just as the ground beneath the toad began to give way. Everything happened in an instant. The toad, disoriented by the luminescent mushrooms, didn't notice it had landed on the edge of an excavator tunnel. The earth crumbled beneath its weight with an ominous crunch. Its bright eyes widened in surprise as it fell, its melodious croak transforming into a shriek of panic. A deep roar rose from the tunnel's darkness, followed by the unmistakable sound of jaws snapping shut. The other moon toads froze, their bioluminescent patterns becoming erratic with fear. The acid smell intensified, an involuntary defensive reaction. Ren didn't stop to think. His legs, newly freed from paralysis, moved by instinct. A jump to the right, away from the formerly invisible tunnel edge he could now see thanks to the freshly collapsed earth. The tunnels, he gasped as he ran. They form a pattern. Night excavators were methodical, territorial. Their tunnels always followed the same design, a main entrance with traps and a semicircle around it. If the toad had fallen into one, another crunch to his left confirmed his theory. 2 of the remaining toads, in their rush to chase him, had jumped directly onto another weak section. The earth opened beneath them like a hungry mouth. More roars from the depths, more abruptly interrupted shrieks. The last moon toad, perhaps wiser than its companions, disappeared into the night with a terrified croak. Ren stopped, panting, his heart threatening to burst. The mushrooms in his hair still pulsed weakly, but now they seemed more like a reminder of his luck than a curse. You, he whispered to his spore, still fused with it, are still the weakest beast that exists. But, thanks, I guess. A distant crunch reminded him this was no time to celebrate. Somewhere beneath his feet, a night excavator had just enjoyed an unexpected dinner of moon toads, and he didn't want to be dessert. The dead tree. He had to find the dead tree before. A deep roar made the earth tremble beneath his feet. It was just an excavator, he reassured himself. They wouldn't come out. But the noise attracted something else. A new sound froze Ren's blood, a metallic hiss like blades dragging against stone. The underground roars quieted, as if trying to go unnoticed. The new sound came from the deep forest, toward the bronze ring where darkness was densest. Ren hid behind a tree. A mirror mantis emerged between the trees, its body covered in reflective plates that fragmented the moonlight. It was huge, horse-sized, but something was wrong with it. Its plates, which should form a perfect pattern, were cracked and misaligned. Deep scars furrowed its exoskeleton, and one of its main sides was broken near the tip. Ren's heart stopped. There shouldn't be a creature like this within 20 kilometers. Mirror mantises were creatures of the deep forest, bronze-rank beasts that would normally never approach a zone so poor in mana. Their bodies were designed to absorb and reflect the dense magical energy of their territory, using their reflective plates to disorient prey with light and mana illusions. This one had been expelled from its territory, probably after losing a territorial battle. The wounds had weakened it so much it couldn't even maintain its natural habitat. And a wounded beast, hungry, forced to hunt in poor lands, was 1,000 times more dangerous than any local predator. The mantis turned its triangular head toward him. Its eye facets, normally a kaleidoscope of iridescent colors, were dull with hunger. The plates on its body tried to reflect the moonlight, but the pattern was erratic, sickly. Instead of the usual hypnotic illusions, it produced only desperate flashes. "Don't look at me. Don't look at me," Ren silently pleaded, remembering the basic lessons about beasts that every child learned. Mirror mantises usually hunted by creating illusory duplicates of their prey, confusing them until they stumbled over their own reflections. But this one, in its famished state. A stray flash created a small reflection beside the tree and illuminated Ren. The creature moved. Despite its wounds, its speed was terrifying. The scythes, even the broken one, cut the air with a deadly whistle. No games, no illusions. Just pure desperate hunger. Ren ran. The dead tree had to be close. His father had mentioned that the twisted roots pointed north, that the bark marked by ancient lightning formed an arrow-like pattern. Behind him, the metallic hiss drew closer. The mantis couldn't maintain that speed for long in a zone so poor in mana, but it didn't need to. It only needed to catch him once. A scythe plunged into the ground beside him. So close he felt the displaced air cut his cheek. The mantis's broken plates tinkled like broken bells, its breathing a tortured hiss of hunger and desperation. And then Ren saw it. The dead tree, its twisted silhouette cut against the night sky. But the mirror mantis was getting closer, and the sound of its broken plates was like a promise of death. Chapter 8, Taming the Tunnels. Ren saw it, the dead tree, its twisted silhouette cut against the night sky. The mirror mantis was getting closer, and the sound of its broken plates was like a promise of death. The dead tree was less than 50 meters away when the ground gave way beneath Ren's feet. Hope had got him distracted. For one terrible moment, Ren floated in darkness, his stomach lurching as gravity claimed its prey. His father's kitchen knife flew from his belt. In an act of pure instinct, Ren grabbed it. The blade plunged into the tunnel wall, slowing his fall with strength he didn't know he had. Earth and stones rained around him, striking his face, getting in his eyes. Above, the mirror mantis stopped at the hole's edge. Its broken plates created a sickly kaleidoscope of fragmented moons. The creature tilted its triangular head, calculating, hungry. No. Ren kicked at the wall, searching for a foothold. The knife was slipping, the earth gave way and Ren fell. The mantis jumped. Its sides gleamed in the darkness as it fell, the metal of its broken exoskeleton singing a death song. Ren saw his life flash before his eyes, 10 short years that would end in darkness, far from his parents without even the chance to. A deafening roar shook the tunnel. The image of the excavator catching him made him drive the knife back in, and in his desperation, he saw a small tunnel beside him. The parallel tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for Ren to crawl through. Without thinking, Ren pushed himself toward the tunnel. But the mantis caught up. However, just before it could grab Ren as he entered the tunnel, the wall beneath the mantis opened, revealing the monstrous head of a night excavator. The beast had been hibernating, storing what little mana was available, when the collapse had awakened it, and now it was hungry. The mirror mantis twisted in the air, its scythes finding excavator flesh instead of its original prey. The excavator roared in pain, its massive claws emerging from the earth to catch its attacker. Ren was paralyzed with terror. Less than 2 meters away, 2 nightmare beasts fought in a deadly dance of metal and earth. The mantis's broken plates created chaotic flashes in the darkness, while the excavator tried to drag its prey into the depths. To his right, almost invisible in the darkness, Ren distinguished an opening. An older tunnel, its wall smoothed by the passage of time. He had no choice. The winner would be decided soon. He crawled into the tunnel while behind him the battle reached its climax. The mantis's metallic shriek mixed with the excavator's roar. There was a horrible crunch, and then silence. Ren crawled away from the edge, his breathing so loud in his ears he feared the winning beast might hear him. I'm alive, he thought, incredulous. The mushrooms in his hair provided the only light in the tunnel's absolute darkness, their weak glow barely sufficient to see his own trembling hands. Please let the excavator have won, Please let the excavator have one, Ren muttered while crawling as fast as he could. Night excavators were territorial and slow. If it won the battle, it would take its time devouring its prey before considering pursuing him. But if the mantis won, a victorious shriek made his blood freeze. It wasn't the deep roar he'd hoped to hear. No, no, no. The mushrooms in his hair barely illuminated the path when a fork appeared before him. The left tunnel was irregular, clearly the work of some beast. But the right one. Ren stopped, panting. The walls were too smooth, too perfect. Exactly as his father had described in his stories. As if someone had melted the stone itself, son. A tunnel of the ancients, from when humans lived here and shaped rock with magic. Behind him, the wet sound of flesh being torn made him nauseous. The mantis was feeding. But one meal was all it needed to recover strength and continue hunting. Ren entered the ancient tunnel, now in a much more spacious place. The mushrooms in his hair revealed marks on the walls, symbols he couldn't understand but that were definitely not natural. This had to be the path his father had found. The tunnel seemed to stretch eternally into darkness. Ren had maintained a quick pace for what felt like hours, driven by fear and adrenaline. But now his legs trembled from the effort and his breathing was heavy. He stopped, leaning against the smooth wall of the ancient tunnel. Remembering what his father said about berries helping recover energy and maintaining a clear mind, he ate some of the ones he'd brought. He thought about lighting a torch with the flint, but he'd forgotten to collect wood, and his mushrooms provided enough light. With a clearer mind, he began to analyze his situation. According to his father's map, he should have found the exit by now. Had he taken a wrong turn, chosen the wrong tunnel? The mushrooms in his hair provided light in the absolute darkness, but their glow was barely enough to see a few meters ahead, though they were better than a torch. They had saved him too. Ren had been cursing them since he'd invoked them, but now, at least you're good for something, he murmured to the spore, still fused with him. Even if just as a lamp. He let himself drop to the ground, his legs grateful for the rest. The water from his canteen was lukewarm, but had never tasted better. While catching his breath, he studied the mysterious symbols on the walls. Some seemed to respond weakly to his mushroom's light, as if they recognized something in their faint glow. I suppose I should thank you for the thing with the toads too, he continued, surprising himself by talking to the world's weakest creature. Though it was pure luck, you probably didn't even know what you were. A distant echo interrupted his words. The unmistakable sound of metal against stone, followed by that blood-freezing hungry hiss. The mantis had finished feeding. And this time there would be no more excavators to distract it. This time he would be alone. And now it was coming for him. No, no, no. Ren jumped up when the metallic hiss resonated in the distance, but closer. The mushrooms in his hair now pulsed with a strange yellowish glow, but he barely had time to wonder why. The tunnel stretched before him like a black throat. There were no side exits, no places to hide. Chapter 9, Taming the Mantis. No, no, no. Ren jumped up when the metallic hiss echoed closer. The mushrooms in his hair now pulsed with a strange yellowish glow, but he barely had time to wonder why. The tunnel stretched before him like a black throat. No side exits, no places to hide. Just smooth, ancient stone, and those mysterious symbols that seemed to glow faintly under his mushroom's yellow light. Come on, Ren urged himself. The metallic hiss drew closer. He could hear the sighs scraping against the tunnel walls, the sickly tinkling of broken plates. Another hiss, closer. The mantis moved faster now, the excavator's flesh providing it with new energy. The jingling of its damaged exoskeleton was like a death bell approaching in the darkness. Ren ran. His feet struck the ancient floor as he plunged deeper into the tunnel. The air grew colder, denser. His breathing echoed in his ears, mixing with the ever-closer sound of scythes against stone. Scritch, scritch, scritch. The mantis didn't even need to run. Its steady, relentless pace was enough. Sooner or later, the tunnel would end. Sooner or later, he'd run out of places to flee. A flash of its scythes illuminated the tunnel behind him. The beast was close enough now that the mushroom's light revealed the sickly gleam of its eye facets, the irregular pattern of its broken plates. It didn't matter that it was injured. It didn't matter that it had been expelled from its territory. It was still a bronze-rank creature, and he was just a child with the world's weakest beast. The tunnel began to narrow. Or maybe his eyes were playing tricks in the darkness. The yellow light from the mushrooms cast strange shadows on the walls, making the ancient symbols seem to dance. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Closer, ever closer. Ren stumbled, his knee striking stone. Pain exploded in his leg, but terror kept him moving. He rose and kept running, limping, crawling forward. The mantis hissed, the sound now so close he could feel the vibration in his bones. Its broken plates created a nightmare spectacle on the tunnel walls, reflecting the mushroom's yellow light in fractal, demented patterns. And then, The tunnel ended. A smooth, solid wall rose before him, covered in ancient symbols that seemed to mock his fate. No way out. The metallic hiss stopped. In the silence that followed, Ren could hear the scythe scraping against stone as the mantis approached slowly, savoring the moment. It no longer needed to run. It no longer needed to hurry. Its prey was cornered. It only had to. The mushroom's yellow light intensified, as if responding to Ren's terror. The symbols on the wall began to glow with the same sickly hue, peeling off the walls in small clouds, creating patterns that reminded him of spores? The mirror mantis stopped. Its eye facets reflected the yellow light, creating a kaleidoscope of death on the tunnel walls. It raised its scythes, preparing for the final blow. But something was wrong. The beast tilted its triangular head, confused. Its broken plates tinkled with a new rhythm, more erratic, more frightened. The air grew dense, heavy with a smell Ren had never experienced before. It was like damp earth and rusted metal, like rotting leaves and something older, deeper. The symbols on the wall, which he thought were marks of the ancients, began to move. No, not move. They were detaching. They're not symbols, whispered Ren, the horror of realization hitting him like an icy fist. They're spores, dormant spores. The mantis took a step back, its metallic hiss transforming into something close to panic. Its plates now reflected thousands of points of yellow light detaching from the walls, ceiling, floor, spores that had been waiting for centuries, awakening to the resonance of the mushrooms in Ren's hair. The entire tunnel was alive, and it was hungry. The ancient spores swirled in the air like a golden storm, enveloping the mantis first. The beast shrieked, a sound Ren never imagined such a fearsome creature could make. Its broken plates, reflecting light imperfectly, created a horror show as the spores found every crack, every fissure in its exoskeleton. Ren pressed himself against the back-inclined wall, his heart beating so hard he thought it would burst. The mantis writhed, its scythes cutting the air uselessly while the golden cloud consumed it. Its metallic shriek faded, transforming into a wet, terrible sound. And then, silence. Where the powerful bronze beast had stood, now lay only a mound of broken plates covered in yellowish mold that pulsed with ancient life. The spores turned toward Ren. The golden cloud swirled like a wave of ancient hunger. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed frantically, but this time there was no confusion. There was no salvation. The ancestral spores weren't normal predators. They were vestiges of a forgotten age, and everything living was their prey. The first contact was like frozen fire on his skin. Yellowish fungi sprouted from his arms, legs, neck, each pulsing with a sickly rhythm that drained his energy. The pain was indescribable, as if every pore in his body was being devoured from within. "No, please," he gasped, falling to his knees. But then he saw it, where the spores had detached from the ceiling, a ray of light filtered through like a promise of salvation. An exit, barely large enough for a child to pass through. Ren stood up, his legs trembling with effort. The invasive fungi kept spreading across his body, but something was different. Where the mantis had succumbed in seconds, he remained conscious. His own spore, the world's weakest beast, pulsed with its light, as if it were fighting. Every effort was agony. He pushed himself upward, his fingers finding the hole's edge just as his knees threatened to give way. The light blinded him momentarily as he crawled out of the tunnel. It wasn't the outside. Chapter 10, Taming Fate. Where the mantis had succumbed in seconds, Ren remained conscious. His own spore, the world's weakest beast, pulsed with light, as if it were fighting. Every effort was agony. He pushed himself upward, his fingers finding the hole's edge just as his knees threatened to give way. The light blinded him momentarily as he crawled out of the tunnel. It wasn't the outside. He emerged into a small natural cave, its walls covered in bioluminescent crystals that bathed everything in an ethereal, spectral blue light. But he could barely appreciate the chamber's beauty. The ancestral fungi continued spreading, consuming his vital energy. "Please," he whispered, his vision blurring. "I don't want to die here." His spore fought valiantly, its own mushrooms creating barriers against the yellow infection, but it was losing the battle. Ren could feel his consciousness fading, his body growing colder by the second. That's when he saw it. In the cave's center, bathed in crystal light, grew a plant that seemed like... It reminded him of the one on his father's stories. "The plant," he mumbled, crawling toward it as the yellow fungi continued their spread. "The one that helped Mother." His fingers brushed the luminous stem, just as darkness began claiming the edges of his vision. With trembling hands, Ren pulled the glowing plant free. The yellow fungi still expanded across his body, but something in his mind, something deeper than conscious thought, told him this was important. This plant was, though he didn't fully understand. His father had found one like it almost 12 years ago, in another tunnel. The miracle medicine that had allowed his mother to conceive. But this one was different. Where his father's plant had been firm and robust, this one was delicate and ethereal. This was the female. His father had found the male. With the ancestral fungi consuming his last strength, Ren brought the plant to his lips. The taste was like liquid light, like remembering a dream. And then he felt it. A deep resonance with something already existing in his body. Dormant genes inherited from his mother. The echo of the other half of the medicine that had made his existence possible. The two halves of an ancient medicine, separated by years and tunnels, finally reunited in his blood. The effect was instantaneous. Pure white light emanated from his skin, so intense that the yellow fungi recoiled, withering and falling like ash. His spore, that supposedly useless creature, began pulsing with a new rhythm, perfectly synchronized with the energy now flowing through his veins. To any observer, the spore would have appeared exactly the same. Small, apparently weak. But Ren could feel that something had fundamentally changed within, as if it had evolved into a completely new variant, one that no one had ever seen before. What Ren didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that he had just completed an ancient recipe, a medicine that required 3 specific ingredients: the male plant, the female plant, and something unique, a host born with the first half of the formula. He himself was the missing key. The mushrooms in his hair returned to their usual color, giving the impression that nothing had changed. But in the depths of his being, a dormant power had just awakened. A power that would change everything. Hunger awakened him first, a ravenous void that made his hands tremble as he pulled the bread with stew from his backpack. He ate desperately, savoring each bite as if it were the first food he'd ever tasted. The mushrooms in his hair shone with a stronger light than before, illuminating the cave crystals with dancing shadows. Ren noticed, but he'd survived too many horrors that night to worry about such a small change. As he chewed the last piece of bread, the reality of what he'd done began to hit him. He'd been seconds from death, multiple times. If the moon toads had caught him, if the excavator had found him, if the mantis, if the spores, his parents. What would have become of them if he... "I should go back," he murmured, guilt weighing heavier than exhaustion. This was madness. Return. The voice was so soft at first, he thought it was his own mind. But there was something different about it. Something ancient and wise that resonated deep within his being. And then it began. As if someone had opened a floodgate in his mind, knowledge began to flow. He saw his spore, not as the weak creature everyone despised, but as something with infinite potential. He understood, with crystal clarity, every step necessary for its cultivation. The exact way to feed different types of fungi, the precise cultivation to strengthen the bond, the correct sequence of evolutions, the bifurcations in its path to power. But it didn't stop there. The mirror mantis, he saw how its plates formed, how it channeled light and mana, the weak points in its exoskeleton where cracks always began. Its life cycle. The night excavators, the way they built their tunnels, the patterns they followed, how they conserved energy during times of scarcity. The moon toads, the mechanism behind their hypnotic eyes, the exact composition of their acid, the mating rituals that determined their hunting patterns. The ecology and biology of the creatures he'd encountered became clear to him now. It was as if he could see the invisible threads connecting all creatures, understand their most intimate natures, their strengths, their weaknesses, their secrets. What is this?" he whispered, overwhelmed by the avalanche of information. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, and for the first time since obtaining his spore, Ren felt he could see the path before him. Not just his own. All creatures' paths. Chapter 11, Taming the Way Home. The information in his mind was clear but limited, like a map showing only the beginning of a much longer journey. Ren could see the first steps of his spore's cultivation with perfect clarity, the specific types of fungi needed, the exact conditions for growth, the strengthening rituals. There was something he could take from the tunnel for the final step of his cultivation. But the other parts needed for its cultivation? None of that was anywhere near here. "The first fungi I need," he murmured, processing the information, "grow in the swamp zones north of the rival city, not in this forest." The revelation hit him with both frustration and relief. However, something else gleamed at the edges of this new knowledge. A promise. When his spore reached bronze rank, a possibility would open that made his heart beat faster. A second contract. A second beast. The rest was nebulous, like looking through murky water. But the certainty was there. Each evolution of his spore would not only strengthen it, but also expand his understanding of beasts and their paths. "I have to go back," he said aloud. This time with determination rather than fear or regret. "I have to get a lot of stuff and start cultivating from the beginning." The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, as if nodding. It was time to return home. His parents would be worried sick if he arrived too late. And now he had a real plan. Not a desperate search, but a clear path. Although first, he'd have to find a way out of this cave. The mana density in this cave was insane. Ren would be poisoned if he didn't get out soon. How there could be so much mana in a place in the bronze ring was a mystery to him, even with his expanded knowledge. He wanted to take some of the enormous mana crystals from the cave, but none were loose. It was a great joint formation, as if it were someone's work from the past rather than something natural. Since it was impossible to break the incredibly hard formations, perhaps he could return to try another time. A mana crystal became much more resistant the larger it grew. He'd need something really powerful to extract it. Much more than a pick. Even the bronze-rank mantis probably couldn't have broken it. Decided to retreat, Ren observed the tunnel through which he'd arrived. The ancestral spores were still there, dancing in the darkness with their sickly golden glow, but now he saw them differently, understood their nature with astonishing clarity. They're not aggressive by nature, he murmured, processing the knowledge flowing in his mind. They attack because they're hungry after centuries of hibernation, but their true method is. He stopped, an idea forming. The ancestral spores, like all fungi, follow basic behavioral patterns. They sought nutrients, yes, but more importantly they responded to specific chemical signals. Ren took some mud. And if I combine this with? A yellowish mold formed where the ancestral spores fell, as if analyzing its composition. Ren closed his eyes, concentrating. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed, releasing gray spores that mixed with his sweat. It was disgusting, but now he understood the purpose of the information pulsing in his head. The spores from his own beast contained chemical markers that identified him as part of the colony. He smeared the mixture on his exposed skin full of spores. The ancestral spores should recognize me as another fungal colony now, he murmured, and should keep them at sufficient distance too. Ren knelt beside the mirror mantis's remains. Under the broken plates and yellowish mold, he could see what he was looking for, the crystalline core, a structure of the beast that acted as their power center. It was the size of his fist. Beast cores, he whispered, the knowledge unfolding in his mind, are like concentrated eggs. They contain all the creature's genetic information, its mana patterns, its essence, and there's a way to revive them. He took some of the mantis's plates, those he could carry in his backpack, and the golden fungus from the ancestral spores that had formed while consuming the mantis. He stepped toward the tunnel. The golden spores swirled around him but didn't attack. To them, he was now just another fungal organism of the same species, not prey. It works, he whispered, amazed by his own knowledge. It really works. While carefully advancing through the tunnel, Ren couldn't help but smile. A few hours ago he'd been convinced his spore was useless. Now that same weakest monster had given him the knowledge to survive, where a bronze-rank beast had perished. And the core in his hands. Anyone else would see it as a mere trophy. But Ren could see its true value, an option to obtain the mirror mantis. A creature that someday he might need. The ancestral spores tunnel ended up being the easiest stretch of the return journey. Ren emerged covered in mud, and a mixture of gray and some stray golden spores, but alive, and with a valuable treasure in his backpack. He first cleaned the excess mud and golden spores carefully. Now, facing the return path, everything looked different. Where before there was terror and uncertainty, now there was understanding. The night excavator tunnels weren't a random maze as he'd thought. They always dig in spirals, he murmured to himself, recognizing the patterns in the ceiling. And they marked their active territories with deeper scratches on the eastern walls. Thanks to this, he could avoid zones where other excavators might be active while looking for a less steep trap to exit through. Emerging into the moon toad zone, he stopped to listen. The melodious croaking came from the distance, but now he understood its meaning. 3 ascending tones they're hunting. 4 descending tones would be mating, he whispered. And they always leave one toad watching escape routes while the others chase prey. He waited patiently until the croaking pattern changed, indicating the toads had moved away following some nocturnal prey's trail. Only then did he move, keeping to areas where the ground was more compacted. Moon toads hate hard, dry earth. The knowledge flowed naturally now. Their feet are designed for soft terrain where they can bury themselves quickly. On firm ground, their bodies lose moisture. Even the natural trap zones were obvious now. The excavators always left small sandstones arranged in certain ways, patterns in soil erosion. To untrained eyes they seemed like coincidences, but to Ren now they were like warning signs glowing in the night. The mushrooms in his hair, still shining with that more intense yellowish tone than before, lit his path as he advanced with renewed confidence. They showed the pattern of the frog's eyes. Ren was no longer worried about being betrayed by their light. Now they even served as camouflage. Every step was calculated, every decision informed by knowledge that just hours ago he didn't even know existed. It's as if I've been blind my whole life, he thought, while skillfully avoiding a zone that showed clear signs of toad activity. And now I can finally see. The night that had begun as a desperate struggle to survive had become a practical lesson about the true nature of beasts, and his supposed curse, the weakest spore, turned out to be the key to understanding all these secrets. The magical forest's end finally appeared before him, the last magical trees glowing from frog urine against the night sky. Ren stopped a moment, unconsciously touching the mantis core in his pack. He had set out seeking a second beast, a miracle to change his destiny. What he'd found was something far more valuable: understanding. Chapter 12. Taming Gratitude. The edge of the common forest was near. Ren could see in the distance, about 5 kilometers away, the first houses of the outskirts, small lights flickering in the darkness like fallen stars. Faced the consequences of his actions. He paused for a moment, adjusting the backpack where he kept his obtained treasures. How would he explain all this? The scratches, the mud, the golden fungus, the plates, the core. Perhaps he could slip in through his window and... A movement in the darkness made him freeze. For a moment he thought they were frogs expelled from their territory. Dangerous. As so hungry and lacking mana they would act differently than normal. But 2 silhouettes moved near the forest's edge, one carrying a dim lamp. Even at this distance he recognized the way they moved, not monsters, but his parents. His father led the way, hoe in one hand and his mature plant ready for combat. His mother followed close behind, her own vines subtly spreading across the ground, prepared for defense. Of course it would have obviously revealed his path and pointed the exact way he'd gone. The map. As soon as they realized Ren wasn't in his room, his father would have noticed the map's absence immediately. How many times had he seen Ren studying it, asking details about that desperate adventure in search of medicine? It was obvious where a child who had just received the weakest spore would look for hope. Ren watched them move in the darkness. Despite their basic beasts, they moved with the coordination that only years of working together could give. He had seen them like this before, in the kitchen, working in perfect synchronization. But now, his new knowledge let him see more of it. How his father's plant extended in specific ways to detect movement. How his mother's vines created precise defensive patterns with the surrounding roots. Even with only mature iron-rank beasts, they had developed effective techniques. The mushrooms in his hair glowed more intensely. He was tired, covered in mud and gray spores, but alive. And now he would have to face what was coming. He had no choice. He took a step toward the light. Just one. The yellowish glow of the mushrooms in his hair betrayed him. There, his father whispered. A frog so close to the prairie could have attacked Ren. The vines moved with surprising speed, and Ren felt the familiar grip of his mother's plants wrapping around him. For a moment, he considered explaining how mature iron-rank vines had a growth pattern that... Ren! His mother's cry cut through his thoughts. The vines loosened instantly. Ren prepared for the worst. He now knew the biology of dozens of beasts, understood the most complex behavioral patterns, but had no idea how to handle what was coming. The punishment would be severe, he knew. He had stolen his father's precious map, had run away in the middle of the night, His mother reached him first, practically knocking him over with the force of her embrace. His father arrived a second later, enveloping them both in his arms. They were crying. My child, his mother sobbed, squeezing him so tight he could barely breathe. My little one. We thought. His father couldn't finish the sentence, his voice breaking. Ren stood rigid, waiting. At any moment the shouting would begin, the scolding, the punishment he deserved for being so reckless. He knew he deserved it. He had acted without thinking, I'm so sorry, his mother whispered through tears. If we had chosen to get you a better egg instead of a better school, even if you couldn't cultivate it properly. We shouldn't have risked your future like this, his father added, his voice trembling. We shouldn't have believed you would get the same plants as us with such certainty. When I got sick, we should have. Ren blinked, confused. Were they blaming themselves? But I. He tried to explain. I was the one who ran away, who stole the map, who. His father hugged him tighter. We drove you to this, with our expectations, with our... No. Ren pulled back enough to look at them. You sold everything for me, even the house, worked so hard to get me a place in the best school, to get me an egg, any egg, and I. Tears began falling down his cheeks, mixing with the mud and remaining gray spores. I just wanted, his voice broke, wanted you to be proud. We always have been, his mother whispered, gently cleaning his dirty face. Always. There was no shouting that night, no punishments or severe scolding, just 3 people embracing under the light of the 12 moons, crying together while the mushrooms in Ren's hair glowed softly, like fallen stars. And for the first time since the invocation ceremony, Ren understood something that no knowledge about beasts could have taught him. His parents' love was stronger than any disappointment, deeper than any failure. It was unconditional. The walk back across the prairies was silent, interrupted only by his mother's small, contained sobs as she held his hand, as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. At home, the feast they had prepared to celebrate his invocation was still on the table, now cold. His mother immediately began reheating it. It's not necessary, Ren began, but she was already in the kitchen. You must be hungry, she insisted, wiping away tears while she worked. You've been outside in the night so long. To his own surprise, when the aroma of reheated stew filled the room, his stomach growled fiercely. He ate as if he hadn't tasted food in days, each bite awakening a deeper hunger. His body seemed to cry out for energy, as if the transformation had awakened a voracious appetite. I'm so sorry, son. His father broke the silence, his voice breaking. If we weren't so poor, if we had worked harder, if we could have gotten you a better egg. We shouldn't have pressured you so much with our own worry, his mother added, serving another plate of stew that Ren immediately attacked. You must have felt so. If something had happened to you, his father interrupted, we couldn't, the sorrow would have. Don't pressure him with emotional blackmail. His mother scolded his father. Can't you see he suffered enough? Being alone in the forest so long, hiding from frogs in the mud. She approached Ren, stroking his dirty hair tenderly. Would you like a hot bath, darling? Forgive me. His father covered his face with his hands. I'm useless. I couldn't even get you a decent beast. But I promise. I'll go to the forest myself. I'll find a miracle medicine. Something to replace that spore, or to give you a second beast like in the legends. Anything for you, son. Don't misunderstand me, I love you even if you only have that fungus, but for you I. No. The vehemence in Ren's voice surprised everyone, even himself. He stood from the table, fresh tears in his eyes. Please, don't say that, don't apologize. I was foolish. His voice trembled but was full of conviction. This fungus, your gift, is the best gift in the world. I was stupid not to see it before. Chapter 13, Taming Knowledge, No. The vehemence in Ren's voice surprised everyone, even himself. He stood from the table, fresh tears in his eyes. Please, don't say that, don't apologize. I was foolish. His voice trembled but was full of conviction. That egg. This fungus, your gift, is the best gift in the world. I was stupid not to see it before. He bowed deeply to his parents, tears falling to the floor. Forgive me for not thanking you properly, for all your sacrifices, for everything you've done for me. I will triumph at school and make you proud, I promise. The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly, as if nodding to his words. We already are, his mother whispered, lifting him up and embracing him. We always have been. His father joined the embrace, and for a moment, under the light of the 9 moons filtering through the window, the small family remained united, stronger than ever. Ren smiled through his tears. He had much to tell them, much to explain. But for now, this was enough. He was home. In the bathtub, while hot water washed away the mud and spores from his skin, Ren reflected on his new knowledge. The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly, reflecting in the water like tiny stars. His parents' plants. Now he could clearly see what had happened. The knowledge flowed in his mind like a perfectly detailed manual. Basic plant development. 1 iron rank provide 100% correct development points to rise in rank. 2 if 1,000 points accumulate without specific direction, premature maturation. 3 result weak seedling, intermediate maturation, only path available in iron rank. His parents hadn't had a choice. Without knowledge of evolution routes, without resources to buy proper cultivation techniques in their youth, their plants had accumulated development points randomly until reaching the limit. Once they reached 1,000 points, maturation was inevitable. Unrealized potential paths. Bronze rank. Bronze 1 common seedling. Bronze 2 strong seedling. Silver rank. Silver 2 common plant. Silver 3 strong plant. The water cooled while Ren reviewed this information. It was fascinating and tragic at once. His parents had worked so hard, but without the correct knowledge, without understanding the evolution paths, Ren straightened in the bathtub. There were no paths left, but there was an option. The knowledge unfolded in his mind, clear and precise. 1,000 days method, true plant maturation. The mature plants everyone knew were actually an intermediate state, a cocoon waiting to bloom. The true final result required. 1,000 specific development points. 2 1 point per day, without exception. 3 a 3-part ritual that must be performed with absolute precision. The method was deceptively simple. 1 at dawn, the plant must absorb the energy of a common mana crystal drop, can find some on the surface after rains until it completely dissolves. But it must be processed. This energy must mix with a drop of vital essence. 2 during midday, the crystal needs exactly 24 minutes of direct sunlight, not a minute more, not a minute less. 3 at sunset, finally, the mixture must be sealed with golden pollen from night flowers, common plants that bloom in 10-day cycles. It's like daily medicine, Ren thought enthusiastically. And the components are common enough to never run out. The key wasn't in the components, but in precision and consistency. 1 failed day and the process had to restart from zero. Most people who had tried any cultivation with a new method would abandon it after a few months, convinced it wasn't working. Additionally, at the end, they had to seal all the accumulated power in the process with an expensive rune. In this case, his parents would need a vitality rune for the last day. Now I understand why nobody discovers this, murmured Ren. Everyone knows effective cultivation methods last 150 days maximum. Some extend to 6 months, but the 5-month perception was also a misinterpretation. In reality, all methods were only 100 days long, but people wasted time at the beginning trying to find the correct rhythm and getting the mana energy levels wrong. Not that he didn't get why they used less mana every day than the most efficient amount. Mana poisoning was scary. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly while he processed this information. It was strange to know so much. Every beast. Yet even if he could clearly see the evolution paths and cultivation methods up to silver rank. Beyond that, nothing. Everything related to gold rank beasts or higher was an absolute mystery. Perhaps, he thought, when my own spore evolves. But that was a problem for another time. Now he had to find a way to convince his parents to try something that everyone knew was impossible. 1,000 days, a daily mission, 3 magical elements, no margin for error. And the result, a truly mature iron plant could reach the strength of a bronze 2 plant. It wouldn't be as versatile as a plant that had naturally evolved to that rank, but its base power would be the same. Their extra vitality would rise from 40% to 100%, and they would live longer too. He just needed to convince them to try it. For 1,000 days. It's like cooking, he murmured, finding an analogy his parents would understand. You can have the best ingredients, but without the correct recipe. He sank deeper into the water, watching how the mushrooms in his reflection subtly changed color. There had to be a way to show them he wasn't making up stories, to show them he really understood things no 10-year-old should know. But first, he needed to better understand his own powers. Information about other beasts flowed naturally in his mind, but there were limits. Nebulous frontiers where knowledge faded into uncertainty. One step at a time, he whispered, remembering how his father always said that same thing when preparing a particularly complex dish. Water dripped from the mushrooms in his hair when he finally left the bath. In the foggy old mirror, his reflection stared back a small, scrawny boy with red hair and green eyes, luminescent mushrooms in his hair. Nobody would believe that this child could be special. He would have to prove it. Ren awoke with the first light, the mushrooms in his hair glowing faintly. In 6 days he would leave for school for 8 long years. But before leaving, he needed to make sure his parents began the ritual. He found them in the kitchen, preparing for another day of work. Their faces still showed marks from the previous night's crying. "Mom, Dad," he called their attention, holding dozens of mana crystals he had found over the years in the garden. "Before I go to school, could you promise me something?" Chapter 14, Taming the 1,000 Days Method. Ren awoke with the first light of dawn, the mushrooms in his hair glowing with a faint radiance. He had dreamed of evolution routes and paths of power. But among all that knowledge, one simple idea had crystallized. His parents were cooks. He dressed quickly and went down to the kitchen. As expected, his parents were already there, preparing the day's bread. "Dad?" he called softly. "Can I ask you something about cooking?" His father turned, surprised. Ren had never shown much interest in the technical details of cooking, and though he always helped, he didn't do it to learn. "When you make bread," Ren continued, "why do you let the dough rest for exactly 12 hours? "Well," his father smiled, always happy to share his knowledge with his son. "That's the time natural yeast needs to." "And if someone told you that you only need 2 hours?" His father frowned. "It wouldn't work the same. Fermentation needs." "How do you know?" "Because I've tried it. All bakers have tried it. We look for shortcuts at first, but with time you learn that some processes simply need their time." Ren smiled. "And if someone told you you're wasting your time, that 12 hours is too much, that nobody waits that long?" "Then," his father crossed his arms, "I'd show them 2 loaves, one with 2 hours of rest and one with 12. The proof is in the result. Even if everyone says you're crazy for waiting so long." A spark of understanding appeared in his father's eyes. "This isn't about bread, is it?" "Mom, Dad?" Ren called their attention, holding hundreds of small mana crystals he had collected over the years. "Before I go to school, could you promise me something?" Mana crystals this small weren't very valuable. You needed about 5 to buy a decent loaf of bread. But Ren was offering them around 500, about $50. Before you feel the need to ask. A rather significant amount for a child. His parents exchanged glances. The kind of glances adults share when a child is about to say something that will break their hearts. I found a way to make your plants stronger," Ren continued, trying to sound confident despite the lump in his throat. "It's a ritual that takes 1,000 days, but I promise," Ren said firmly, "that if you trust me and follow exactly what I tell you for 1,000 days, your plants will reach the power of a bronze rank 2 beast." "Son." His father began skeptically. "Like bread, Dad. The proof will be in the result." "Oh, darling." His mother knelt before him, her eyes moistening again. "I know it sounds impossible," Ren continued quickly. "But you only need to absorb this each day, with these mana crystals, and—" He understood what they were thinking, their little son desperately trying to convince himself and them that everything would be all right, that his weak fungus and their mature plants didn't mean a future of misery. "Please," he whispered, just promise me you'll try it, for 1,000 days. His father wiped tears with the back of his hand. "Son, even if you don't believe me, even if you think it's foolish, just do it, please." His parents looked at each other again, this time with a mixture of pain and love so deep that Ren felt his heart breaking. "Of course we'll do it," his mother hugged him, her voice trembling. "Every day, without fail." 1,000 days, his father nodded, joining the embrace. We promise. His father looked at one mana crystal, then at his plant. What do we need to do? Ren knew they were just playing along, that they thought this was his way of coping with the trauma of having the weakest beast, of having to leave for school where he would be mocked for years. But they had promised to try. They never had broken a promise with him. And for now, that was enough. The last 6 days had passed in a blur of detailed instructions and practices on how to process the crystal. His parents followed each step with a dedication that broke Ren's heart, not because they believed it would work, but because they couldn't bear to see the hope in their son's eyes fade. Now Ren had 2 years to get them 2 vitality runes. He would have to pay about 20,000 crystals or find a way to... He would see how to achieve it. If the school was, as they said, maybe it wouldn't be so difficult. Or maybe it would. Now, while packing his last belongings, Ren mentally reviewed the requirements for his own spore's evolution. The components were significantly more demanding than the mana crystals and pollen his parents needed. Fortunately, the Imperial Academy of Cultivation and Evolution wasn't just any school. It was one of the city's 3 most prestigious institutions, if not the most prestigious, with extensive laboratories, thousands of specialized cultivation techniques, and according to rumors, even ancient ruins on its grounds. Do you have everything ready? His mother asked from the door, holding a food package he had prepared for his journey. Ren nodded, unconsciously touching the mantis core that was next to the plates and golden fungus in his bag. They hadn't believed how he obtained these things, though they pretended to. How could they believe something like that? The mushrooms in his hair glowed softly as he hugged his parents one last time. In a year, when he returned, their plants would have completed almost a third of the ritual. And in less than 3 years, though they didn't believe it possible now, they would reach a power that would change their lives. He couldn't wait to return for the second time and give them their runes as a gift. Remember, don't miss a single day, were his last words before boarding the carriage that would carry the new students. As the wheels began to turn, Ren took a deep breath. The coming years would be difficult. Being the child with the weakest beast at one of the most prestigious academies wouldn't be easy. But he had a plan. He had knowledge that no one else possessed. And most importantly, he had something to prove. The carriage moved away from the outskirts, heading toward the heart of the city, where the Imperial Academy's spires rose like spears against the morning sky. It was time for the boy with the uselessest fungus to begin his true path to power. Chapter 15, Taming Mockery. As the carriage pulled away, Ren couldn't help worrying about his parents. Though they wouldn't tell him, Ren's new knowledge had shown him subtle details in their bodies and invocations that were beginning to show signs of mana poisoning. His father particularly, that's why he had fallen ill. Living in the outskirts for so many years. That poor house didn't have a great location, but its land wasn't small at all. They had sold it for about 500,000 crystals. The house they'd sold to pay for his education, they would now have to rent. And with their mature iron rank plants, they would barely earn enough in the kitchens to keep themselves fed. At 60 years old, they were already close to normal life expectancy. Only the base vitality their plants granted them guaranteed an additional 30 years, a precious gift, but not enough in Ren's eyes. If they complete the ritual, he murmured, if their plants reach Bronze 2 power, they wouldn't just gain more strength and better job opportunities. The increased vitality would give them several additional decades of life. It would cure his father. Ren would see his parents only once a year, if he managed to gather money for the trip. About 100 crystals should be easy to get, or so he thought. What wouldn't be easy would be getting the runes and materials necessary for his own evolution. But it didn't matter. Ren wanted to excel in school and make them proud, maybe even become wealthy and buy them a house in the city. He knew his parents deserved it more than anyone. But everything in its time. He would have 2 years to achieve his first goal, 8 years for the second, 8 visits total before graduating, 8 opportunities to verify their progress with a ritual, to ensure they followed each step correctly. In the best case, by the 3rd visit already. The carriage crossed through city streets, taking him further and further from the outskirts where his parents would begin another day of hard work, always believing they were following a meaningless ritual just to make their son happy. Ren's fingers unconsciously traced the mantis core in his bag, knowledge about his own spore flowing through his mind. But before he could contract it, he would need to turn it into an egg and evolve his fungus to bronze rank. To evolve, he would need 1. First, absorb the essence of death. Charge a bronze rank crystal with the moss that grows on discarded bodies of bronze beasts. 2. Then, mix it with venomous spores from bronze rank fungi. 3. Finally, seal the process with the mold that forms on some magical runes when they absorb too much mana. He had to absorb those expensive processed crystals for 100 days before consuming the final piece. The piece for the final day was the golden fungus in his backpack. The mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly, as if responding to his thoughts about cultivation. "I'll show them," whispered Ren, his mushrooms glowing with determination. "I'll show them that their faith in me, even if pretended, wasn't in vain." The carriage stopped to pick up more students in the commercial district. Ren sank into his seat, conscious of the glowing mushrooms in his hair. Before, he would have expelled his spore to hopefully avoid mockery. But now, The idea of losing that constant flow of knowledge, of returning to ignorance about beasts and their secrets, was unbearable. A group of 3 children boarded, their fused beasts already granting them cool visible changes: metallic claws, tiger markings, gleaming scales. They stopped when they saw him. "Oh, look who's here," smiled the tallest, a boy with feline features thanks to his tiger beast. "The rotting boy. Are those glowing mushrooms on your head?" The group's only girl wrinkled her nose. "Can't you at least hide them? It's disgusting." "Leave him," laughed the third, his green scales gleaming. "He probably can't even control his beast properly." "Isn't that right, rotting boy? Your spore is so weak it has to cling to your head to move." Laughter filled the carriage. Ren clenched his fists, knowledge flowing through his mind. The first boy's spirit tiger would reach its limit at Bronze 1 rank, unable to evolve further due to a flaw in its core cultivation, deriving his spirit tiger into a mature earthly tiger, instead of reaching greater spectral tiger at Silver 3. The girl's beast, a lesser fire eagle, had a defect in its mana absorption pattern that would limit its fire controlling growth at Bronze 2, deriving her lesser fire eagle into a mature red eagle, instead of reaching greater sun eagle at Silver 3. And the third boy's scales, but that knowledge was useless now. It only made it more painful, seeing the defects and limitations in their beast cultivation methods, but being unable to say anything without seeming crazy. "At least my mushrooms glow," he finally said, his voice firmer than expected. "Your spirit tiger has a cultivation defect that makes its fur opaque." Silence fell in the carriage. The tiger boy looked at him with both surprise and fury. "What did you say?" "Nothing," Ren turned back to the window. "Just that maybe you should worry more about your own beast than my mushrooms." "What do you know about cultivation, rotting boy?" he growled, his feline features intensifying with anger. "Your pathetic spore doesn't even have true development, doesn't even qualify as a beast." Knowledge burned in Ren's mind, tempting him to reveal more, to explain exactly how the tiger's cultivation would affect its future evolution, and show him how foolish he was. But he bit his tongue. "I'm just saying what I see," he murmured. "What you see?" The boy grabbed him by the shirt collar. "I'll show you what I see, a weakling with mushrooms on his head who needs to be taught his place." His companions laughed, forming a circle around them. The carriage had suddenly become smaller, more suffocating. "Look, he's even trembling," mocked the eagle girl. "Isn't he adorable?" Ren wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from frustration. He could see their beast's flaws so clearly: the irregular mana pattern in the eagle's feathers, the instability in the other boy's green scales. Useless knowledge when you're about to be beaten.